John Winston Lennon was born on October 9, 1940, in Liverpool, England, during a time of turbulence and war. John's upbringing was far from conventional. His father, Alfred Lennon, was often absent due to his work as a merchant seaman, and his mother, Julia, found herself unable to care for him full-time. As a result, young John was raised by his Aunt Mimi and Uncle George, who provided stability but lacked the warmth that John craved. Though John lived with Aunt Mimi, his mother, Julia, played a pivotal role in sparking his passion for music. It was she who introduced him to the banjo and later the guitar. The first time Lennon heard Elvis Presley, everything changed. The raw energy and rebellious spirit of rock and roll spoke directly to him. He began dreaming of forming his own band, one that would shake up the world just as Elvis had done. In 1957, John formed his first band, the Quarrymen, named after his school. The group played skiffle music, a genre blending jazz, blues, and folk. It was at one of these small performances that John's life would change forever. In the audience that day was a 15-year-old named Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney, a talented musician in his own right, was introduced to John after the show. They quickly hit it off, bonding over their shared love of rock and roll and their dreams of stardom. Soon after, Paul joined the Quarrymen, marking the beginning of a creative partnership that would revolutionize modern music. Together, John and Paul began writing original songs, developing a distinctive style that combined John's biting wit and rebellious spirit with Paul's melodic sensibilities. Their partnership was electric, and it wasn't long before they were joined by George Harrison and later drummer Ringo Starr. The Beatles were born. Before conquering the world, the Beatles honed their craft in the gritty clubs of Hamburg, Germany. The long hours, the intense atmosphere, and the experience of performing live night after night transformed the band from amateur musicians into a tight, dynamic group. John, as the natural leader, pushed the band to new heights. Back in Liverpool, the Beatles became a sensation, performing regularly at the Cavern Club. Their infectious energy, tight harmonies, and unique blend of rock, pop, and rhythm and blues caught the attention of local record store owner Brian Epstein, who soon became their manager. In 1962, with Epstein's guidance, the Beatles signed with EMI and met producer George Martin. Their first single, Love Me Do, was a modest success, but their follow-up, Please Please Me, launched them to stardom. By 1963, the Beatles were dominating the British charts, and Beatlemania had taken hold. In February 1964, the Beatles made their historic appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show, captivating a record-breaking audience of over 73 million viewers. The world had never seen anything like it. John Lennon, with his acerbic wit and distinctive voice, became an icon almost overnight. The Beatles were now the biggest band in the world, and John was at the center of it all. As the Beatles evolved, so did John Lennon's music. Albums like Rubber Soul and Revolver showcased a more introspective and experimental side of Lennon. His songwriting took on new depth, reflecting his inner turmoil, his dissatisfaction with fame, and his search for meaning. In 1967, the Beatles released SGT, Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, a groundbreaking album that marked the height of their creative powers. John's contribution, particularly the surreal Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, exemplified his increasingly avant-garde approach to music. But as the Beatles soared to new artistic heights, cracks were beginning to form within the band. In 1966, John Lennon met avant-garde artist Yoko Ono at a London art gallery. The two quickly formed a close bond, and their relationship became one of the most controversial and influential of Lennon's life. Yoko inspired John to push the boundaries of his creativity, and together they became outspoken activists for peace and social change. As the 1960s came to an end, John's focus shifted from the Beatles to his relationship with Yoko and his growing interest in political activism. Together, they staged bed-ins and released the iconic anthem "Give Peace a Chance." But this new direction, along with growing tensions within the band, contributed to the Beatles' eventual breakup in 1970. In 1971, Lennon released Imagine, his most iconic solo album. The title track, with its hopeful message of peace and unity, became an anthem for generations. John had fully embraced his role as an activist, speaking out against war, racism, and injustice. In 1971, John and Yoko moved to New York City, seeking a fresh start. But their peace activism made them targets of the US government, particularly the Nixon administration. John's outspoken criticism of the Vietnam War led to a protracted legal battle as the US attempted to deport him. For years, John fought to stay in the US, all while continuing to make music and promote peace. Eventually, in 1976, he was granted permanent residency, marking the end of his long struggle with the government. In 1975, after the birth of his son Sean, John retreated from the public eye to focus on family life. He spent the next 5 years in relative seclusion, enjoying his role as a father and husband. But in 1980, Lennon returned to the studio, rejuvenated and ready to make music again. That year, John released Double Fantasy, a celebration of love and life. It seemed like a new chapter was beginning for the once rebellious Beatle. But on December 8, 1980, tragedy struck. As John returned home from a recording session, he was shot and killed by a troubled fan outside his apartment building. The world was stunned. John Lennon, the man who had preached peace and love, was gone. John Lennon's life was a story of contradictions, a rebel who sought peace, a man of the people who often felt isolated, a musician who changed the world with his words and his voice.